When we step back into ancient Greece, theatre wasn't just entertainment, it was ritual, politics, and identity rolled into one. Between 550 and 220 BC, Greek theatre flourished as part of festivals dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and ecstasy. Asked in exam. What began as religious choral singing evolved into tragedy, comedy, and satire plays, shaping the very foundations of Western drama. Let's begin with tragedy. First, we have Aeschylus, born around 525 BCE, often called the father of tragedy, asked in exam. His great innovation was adding a second actor, asked in exam, which allowed real dialogue and dramatic conflict beyond the chorus. His crowning work is the Oresteia, a trilogy asked in exam made up of Agamemnon, the libation bearers, and the Eumenides. Together, these plays explore vengeance, justice, and the birth of civic law. Another important play, Prometheus Bound, shows Zeus punishing Prometheus for defying divine power. Next is Sophocles, born in 496 BCE, who added the third actor, asked in exam, giving us richer plots and more nuanced characters. Out of the 123 plays he wrote, only 7 survive. His most famous is Oedipus the King, asked in exam, a tragedy of fate, free will, and self-discovery. But don't forget the others, Antigone, Electra, Ajax, Philoctetes, the women of Trachis, and Oedipus at Colonus, all of which asked in exam. Remind us why Sophocles remains one of the greats. Finally, we meet Euripides, the tragedian closest to modern sensibilities. Born around 484 BCE, he emphasized realism and psychological depth. His characters weren't untouchable heroes, but deeply human figures full of flaws and emotions. Out of roughly 90 plays, 18 survive. His most famous is Medea asked in exam, where Medea takes revenge on Jason by killing their children, a shocking challenge to traditional morality. Another key play is Alcestis asked in exam, which explores love and self-sacrifice. Euripides' tragedies push the boundaries of what theatre could say about human experience. So, when you think of Greek theatre, remember this. It began as ritual to Dionysus, asked in exam. And with Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, it became the foundation of tragedy as we know it today. The innovations of the second actor, the third actor, the trilogy, and the deep psychological portrayal of flawed humanity still echo in drama centuries later. When we think of Greek theatre, tragedy often takes the spotlight, but comedy was just as important. Lighter in tone, yes, but deeply engaged with society, politics, and everyday life. In fact, comedy often reflected the medical theory of the 4 humors: blood, yellow bile, phlegm, and black bile asked in exam. These humors gave rise to familiar comic stereotypes: the fiery choleric, the lazy phlegmatic, the optimistic sanguine, and the gloomy melancholic. Let's break it down into 3 stages: old comedy, middle comedy, and new comedy. Old comedy flourished in the 5th and early 4th centuries BCE. Its trademarks were satire, bold political criticism, and outrageous humor. The undisputed master here was Aristophanes asked in exam. His knights attacked the politician Cleon, while clouds famously ridiculed Socrates and the sophists asked in exam. In Wasps, he mocked Athens' obsession with jury trials asked in exam. And in Frogs, he gave us a hilarious take on the god Dionysus traveling to the underworld to bring back a great poet, asked in exam. Old comedy was fearless, no target was off limits. Middle comedy came next, acting as a bridge. It toned down the sharp political edge but kept elements of parody and social humor. Sadly, only fragments survive. But thanks to writers like Athenaeus of Naucrates, we know it paved the way for the next phase. New comedy emerged in the late 4th century BCE and turned its gaze toward domestic life. Here, the focus shifted to love intrigues, family quarrels, and everyday misunderstandings. The great figure was Menander, asked in exam, who wrote over 100 plays and won 8 Dionysian prizes. His most famous surviving play is Dyskolos, or The Grouch, a witty comedy about stubbornness, love, and reconciliation. This type of comedy would later inspire Roman playwrights like Plautus and Terence, and through them, Shakespeare and Molière. So, what's the legacy? Greek theatre as a whole left an indelible mark on Western culture. Tragedy gave us fate, justice, and human struggle, while comedy gave us satire, laughter, and eventually the framework for romantic and domestic plots. From the sacred festivals of Dionysus to the biting jokes of Aristophanes, Greek theatre set the foundations of dramatic literature, structures, and themes we still see on stage today. Let's go all the way back to the foundations of Western drama. Aeschylus, often called the father of tragedy, transformed Greek theatre forever. Before him, drama was mostly choral storytelling. But Aeschylus introduced a second actor, allowing dialogue and complex interaction between characters. This single innovation moved theatre from narration into genuine drama, making him the true architect of tragedy. His plays are marked by grandeur of language and weighty moral dilemmas. Again and again, he explored fate, guilt, and the role of the gods in human affairs. Through him, tragedy became a stage where divine justice and human responsibility collided. One of his most famous works is Prometheus Bound. Here, Prometheus is punished for stealing fire from Zeus and giving it to humanity. The play captures themes of rebellion, suffering, and divine retribution, presenting Prometheus as both a rebel and a benefactor of humankind. But pause here and mark this Aeschylus' greatest achievement is the Oresteia. Produced in 458 BCE, the only surviving complete Greek trilogy asked in exam. Across 3 plays, it traces the movement from blood vengeance to civic justice. In Agamemnon, the king returns from Troy only to be murdered by his wife Clytemnestra. In the libation bearers, their children Orestes and Electra avenge him by killing their mother, plunging the family deeper into guilt. And in the Eumenides, Orestes is hunted by the Furies until Athena intervenes, establishing the Athenian court of justice. With this moment, vengeance gives way to law, and the cycle of bloodshed is transformed into civic order. Aeschylus' career was also decorated with victory. At the Dionysia festival, he won first prize many times, including in 484, 472, and 463 BCE. His dramas not only advanced theatrical structure, but also compelled audiences to wrestle with the biggest questions: what is justice, how do we live under divine will, and when does human responsibility begin? Among the 3 great tragedians of Athens, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, it is Sophocles who is often called the master of tragedy. Born around 496 BCE, he transformed Greek drama through both technical innovation and profound psychological depth. His most famous contribution was the introduction of the third actor on stage asked in exam. This one change revolutionized theatre, making possible more complex interactions, deeper conflicts, and intricate plots. Where Aeschylus had emphasized divine justice and cosmic order, Sophocles shifted the focus toward human beings, their moral dilemmas, their choices, and the tragic consequences of those choices. Again and again, his plays probe the limits of human agency against the inescapable power of fate. A recurring symbol here is the blind prophet Tiresias, who appears in both Oedipus the King and Antigone, asked in exam, embodying the paradox of blindness and insight, vision, and truth. Now, let's recall his major works. Oedipus the King, asked in exam, is considered one of the greatest tragedies ever written. The story is unforgettable. Oedipus, king of Thebes, unknowingly kills his father and marries his mother, fulfilling a prophecy he desperately tried to avoid. Asked in exam. When the truth emerges, he blinds himself, a chilling emblem of tragic self-discovery. In Antigone, the conflict is between state law and moral conscience. Antigone defies King Creon by performing burial rites for her brother, Her act of loyalty and piety leads to her death, exposing the tragic clash between civic duty and personal morality. In Electra, Sophocles tells of Orestes and his sister avenging the murder of their father Agamemnon. This myth inspired Jean-Paul Sartre's modern play The Flies Asked in Exam, showing its enduring influence. Ajax dramatizes the downfall of a warrior dishonored after being denied Achilles' armor. It explores honor, madness, and the destructive weight of pride. Philoctetes presents a hero abandoned because of his wound, only to be sought later for his indispensable bow of B. The play meditates on betrayal, suffering, and the healing power of compassion. In The Women of Trachis, the tragic consequences of misguided love unfold as Deianira's desperate attempt to regain Heracles' affection leads to his death. Finally, Oedipus at Colonus serves as a sequel to Oedipus the King. Here, the exiled Oedipus finds refuge, reconciliation, and ultimately is received by the gods, turning his cursed fate into redemption. Remember this, Sophocles composed 123 plays, but only 7 survive in full. During his lifetime, he won numerous victories at the Dionysia, proving his mastery of the tragic form. His plays endure because they blend mythic grandeur with psychological realism, offering timeless meditations on fate, suffering, and moral choice. Sophocles' Oedipus the Rex, first staged around 429 BCE, is often hailed as the greatest tragedy of the Greek stage. The drama is set in Thebes Asked in Exam, where Oedipus, once celebrated for saving the city by solving the Sphinx's riddle, now rules as king. But Thebes suffers again, this time under a plague. The oracle declares the curse will not end until the murderer of the former king, Laius, is found. Pause here and remember the famous riddle of the Sphinx is central. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? The answer, of course, is man asked in exam. This riddle of human life sets the stage for the play's deeper questions of identity and knowledge. Determined to uncover the truth, Oedipus vows to find the killer. He turns to Creon and to the blind prophet Tiresias, asked in exam. But Tiresias shocks him with the cryptic revelation that Oedipus himself is the murderer he seeks. Outraged, Oedipus accuses Creon of treachery, while his queen Jocasta dismisses prophecies as unreliable. Yet, the truth begins to emerge piece by piece. Laius had been killed at a crossroads. Oedipus recalls a violent encounter in his youth. Then comes a messenger from Corinth. Polybus, Oedipus's supposed father, has died. Oedipus feels relieved. Surely the prophecy of patricide is false. But the relief is short-lived. The messenger and an old shepherd reveal the final horror. Oedipus is the son of Laius and Jocasta. Jocasta hangs herself, and Oedipus blinds himself in despair, unable to bear the sight of his own truth. The play closes with Oedipus pleading for exile while Creon assumes power. Here, Oedipus embodies the quintessential tragic hero. His hamartia, or tragic flaw, lies in his pride, his impulsiveness, and his relentless pursuit of truth. The themes of fate, blindness, knowledge, and guilt saturate the play. Intensified by dramatic irony, we as the audience know the truth long before Oedipus does. And remember this exam anchor, the play's moral closes with the line, "Count no man happy until he is dead." It warns us of the instability of fortune and the frailty of human happiness. Even beyond antiquity, the story lived on. Sigmund Freud famously coined the Oedipus complex, using this myth of patricide and incest to describe unconscious desires in family dynamics. So in Oedipus, the Rex, myth, theatre, and psychology converge. It remains not only a pillar of classical tragedy, but also a text central to philosophy, psychoanalysis, and literary theory. If Aeschylus gave us the grandeur of divine justice, and Sophocles gave us the balance of fate and human choice, then Euripides, the youngest of the 3 great Athenian tragedians, gave us something strikingly different. the raw psychology of ordinary human beings. Born around 484 BCE, Euripides shifted tragedy away from heroic ideals and into the inner lives of flawed, vulnerable characters. Often, it was women who took center stage complex figures, wrestling with passion, betrayal, and power. Pause here and note this: Euripides was unafraid to challenge tradition. He questioned the justice of the gods, explored moral ambiguity, and dramatized the unsettling truths of desire and suffering. This realism made him controversial in his time, but it is exactly why he remains so powerful for us today. Let's look at his major works. Medea, first staged in 431 BCE, is one of his greatest plays asked in exam. Betrayed by Jason, Medea takes revenge not only on his new wife, but in a shocking act of violence on her own children. Themes of betrayal, revenge, and female agency make Medea one of the most haunting heroines in all literature. Another play, Alcestis, mixes tragedy with tragicomedy. It tells of a queen who sacrifices herself for her husband Admetus, only to be restored to life by Heracles. Here Euripides explores devotion, sacrifice, and the fragile boundary between life and death. The Bacchae is considered his masterpiece, asked in exam. It pits King Pentheus against the god Dionysus and stages the irresistible conflict between order and chaos, reason and ecstasy. Denying divine power leads to Pentheus' destruction, showing the perils of repressing the irrational. In Hippolytus, Euripides examines the dangers of desire and repression. Phaedra's forbidden passion for her stepson sets off a chain of ruin, highlighting the cruelty of the gods and the fragility of chastity. With Electra, Euripides retells the revenge of Orestes and his sister. Unlike Sophocles' noble avengers, here they are tragic victims of circumstance. And remember, this Euripides' version later inspired Carl Jung's psychoanalytic term, the Electra complex, asked in exam. His Trojan Women is a devastating anti-war play. It shows the aftermath of Troy's fall through the eyes of its women, mothers, daughters, widows whose lives are torn apart. Few works in ancient literature speak as powerfully about the human cost of war. Across his career, Euripides wrote around 90 plays, of which 18 survive, a remarkable number compared to his contemporaries. He experimented constantly, often using the deus ex machina, a divine intervention, to resolve plots. Critics in his time accused him of undermining heroic ideals, but his focus on psychology, realism, and human frailty gave his plays lasting depth. Little wonder that later Roman playwrights adored him, and modern theatre continues to adapt him. Euripides remains the innovator of Greek tragedy, the playwright who made myth intensely human.